There's a particular kind of quiet people carry when they say, "I don't need anyone." Not the bold kind. Not the confident, self-made independence you hear in motivational speeches. This one is different. It feels like a sentence spoken slowly, with an exhale, as if the person is trying to convince not you, but themselves. And if you watch closely, there's something almost fragile in that moment. A flicker behind the eyes, a micro pause in the voice. Something that tells you the story didn't start with strength. It started with hurt. People rarely wake up one day and decide not to need anyone. It's a conclusion reached the same way cliffs are shaped by the ocean, slowly, quietly, through years of erosion. You see it in distant partners who never let you close enough to truly know them. In withdrawn adults who seem capable and composed, yet impossible to reach emotionally. In friends who retreat the moment something feels uncomfortable, choosing silence over repair. Outsiders call it coldness, independence, emotional minimalism. But if you sit with it long enough, it looks more like a protective stance. As if the person has carved out a space where no one can disappoint them, and no one can really touch them either. There's an unsettling recognition many viewers feel when hearing this. Because for some, this is not a description of someone else, it's a mirror. That subtle tightening in the chest when someone offers help. That instinct to say, "I'm fine," even when you're overwhelmed. That small, practiced distance you keep, even with people you care about. You tell yourself it's just how you are. Independent. Self-sufficient. Low maintenance. But beneath that, there's something harder to admit. Closeness feels risky in a way you don't always understand. So the real question becomes, why do people who say, "I don't need anyone," often fear closeness the most? And the answer is layered, quiet, and deeply rooted. For many, this stance is not a preference, it's a learned survival strategy. People who grew up with inconsistent or emotionally unpredictable caregivers learned early that needing someone doesn't guarantee comfort. Sometimes it guarantees pain. A child who reaches for support and is met with dismissal begins to associate vulnerability with danger. A child who expresses sadness and is ridiculed learns to silence themselves. A child who depended on someone who frequently let them down learns that dependency equals instability. And a child who felt emotionally invisible eventually internalizes a message. My needs bother people. My feelings are too much. I should handle everything alone. Over time, that message becomes automatic. Invisible. It shapes how they relate to others long before they realize it. These adults aren't rejecting connection because they dislike people. They're rejecting connection because connection is where they were once hurt the most. So emotional distance becomes a kind of shield. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just steady and reliable. You see it in the partner who can talk about work, plans, and logistics, but freezes when asked, "How are you really?" You see it in the friend who disappears when life gets stressful, not because they want to push you away, but because asking for comfort feels like stepping into a burning room. You see it in the adult who never cries, who never depends, who never leans, because needing others feels like giving away something too vulnerable. This is the core mechanism, self-isolation as protection. For some, it feels like the only way to prevent old wounds from reopening. The mind learns to equate emotional closeness with emotional danger. So every time someone tries to cross that internal boundary, even gently, they feel a subtle instinct to retreat. Their body goes into a familiar posture, distance equals safety. But this is where the contradiction quietly grows. Because humans are not built for emotional solitude. Even the most distant people long for connection. They notice when someone leaves. They care more deeply than they admit. They want to be chosen, understood, valued, just not at the cost of exposing the parts of themselves that feel unhealed. So they live in an emotional paradox. They want closeness but fear vulnerability, crave connection but fear the pain that might accompany it. It's not that they don't need anyone. It's that needing someone feels dangerous. Adults who carry this defensive independence often experience small internal triggers that don't match the external situation. If a partner asks for more emotional openness, it might feel like pressure. If a friend expresses disappointment, it might feel like a threat to stability. If someone offers support, it might feel like a spotlight on their internal vulnerabilities. And without fully noticing why, they pull back. They shut down. They choose silence, withdrawal, or emotional neutrality. Not to hurt others, but to keep themselves safe. Many of these individuals learned long ago that the safest place to be is just a few emotional steps back. Close enough to function socially, but far enough to avoid being truly seen. It becomes an emotional sweet spot, controlled, predictable, manageable. No chaos. No heartbreak. But also, no intimacy. And this is the part most people never acknowledge. Emotional distance is not a sign of strength. It's a sign of a wound that healed the only way it could, by building walls instead of bridges. At some point, usually in adulthood, they begin to feel the quiet cost of this adaptation. The loneliness that appears late at night. The sense that people care about them, but never truly know them. The frustration of wanting closeness but not knowing how to stay open. They might blame others for not understanding them, when the truth is that they've been communicating through a protective filter for years. A filter that says, "Don't get too close," even when another part of them is whispering, "Please stay." Most people who carry this form of pseudo-independence are not avoidant by nature, they are avoidant by necessity. Their emotional self-defense is not a flaw. It's a response. A solution that made sense at the time it was created. The real insight, the quiet psychological revelation, is this. I don't need anyone. Doesn't mean, I am strong. It often means, I once needed someone who wasn't there, and I don't want to feel that again. It is an identity built not from empowerment, but from pain. A pain they learned to hide so well that even they forget where it started. The transformation for viewers comes not from forcing themselves into vulnerability, not from suddenly trusting everyone, not from tearing down walls overnight. It begins simply with recognition. The moment you realize that your distance is not who you are, it's what you learned. And anything learned can be unlearned with enough awareness and compassion. Instead of asking yourself, "Why am I like this?" ask, "What part of me once needed protection?" Instead of saying, "I don't care," ask, "What would it mean to care and feel safe at the same time?" Instead of, "I don't need anyone," ask, "What version of closeness wouldn't hurt?" These questions are not instructions. They're doorways. Small shifts in internal dialogue that allow you to approach yourself gently, without pressure. You don't need to suddenly open up or change your emotional style. You don't need to disclose your vulnerabilities to everyone. You don't even need to stop being independent. True independence allows closeness. False independence fears it. The real change begins with noticing the moments where you push people away not because you want distance, but because distance feels familiar. With noticing how often you say, "I'm fine," even when you're carrying too much. With noticing the small tightening you feel when someone cares in a way you're not used to. These micro-recognitions are where the old narrative starts to loosen. Where the armor becomes slightly less rigid. Where the emotional landscape shifts just enough to breathe. And this brings us to the quietest truth of all. People who claim they don't need anyone usually want something incredibly simple. To feel understood without having to fight their own instincts. To feel close without feeling exposed. To be held emotionally without fearing collapse. They don't need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. They need consistency, gentleness, and time. The slow kind of safety that allows a person to finally exhale. And so, as this reflection closes, the message is not about changing who you are. It's about understanding why you became this way, and slowly, compassionately, allowing yourself the possibility of something softer. Not weakness. Not dependency. Just human connection without fear. Because behind the facade of independence is usually someone who simply wants to be understood, but is afraid of being hurt again.